The Valley Current.
Hey, Sophie, you look so young. So lucky. I call you Sophie, but your real name is SC, right?
I go with SC, yes.
Tell me the background on that, because Sophie Charlotte is a very beautiful name.
Yes, thank you for asking. Because I was, after 10 years of trying to get everybody to call me Sophie Charlotte, I was tired of it. And I figured that's not what I want to be remembered for.
SC. I mean, it's exciting. That makes you special. But the book Mobilized is such a great read. I recommend it to all of my listeners because you really do tell the story. I imagine there's going to be a Mobilized AI next, right? Where you talk about how AI changes all this.
Yes. I've started to think about how does the framework, and I've been thinking a lot about it, how does the framework translate versus not? And, the thesis of the book is that great technology is an extension of ourselves. So when we think of great products, we have to think about what makes a great person. And I use mind, body, spirit to describe it. With AI, obviously our mind is further expanded with all the capabilities that it offers. So there's more possibilities there. With our body, like the beauty part, the user experience, I think what we're moving towards is what I call invisible products, where we actually no longer spend time using the products, but this product learns from us and is providing value without us interacting with it. And then the third piece, which is the meaning, personalization, right, the spirit part, I think that's something that AI really can amplify or destroy. And so it's going to be up to us to decide what we do with that.
No, I think you're right on. And, I talked about the 7 essences, and you've covered 3 of them well in a very simple statement. And I've been saying for a while that we need to teach our kids, maybe even in grade school, even in high school. And of course, you're running a venture capital firm, which is seeing a lot of products, I imagine, and seeing a lot of opportunities for new products. So just tell us the story, just generally. How did you get from France to high-powered Silicon Valley, BC? How did that happen over the years? I know you're only about 25 years old, so it must have happened really fast.
I was born and raised in Paris, like you said, and I studied electrical engineering, and then moved to the Bay Area right after that. And I got my MBA there, and then started working in tech as a tech entrepreneur and product manager. And I did that for a decade. And then after a decade, I was invited. I was early at Facebook. I had my own companies. I worked for Electronic Arts as well. And then I was invited to write this book, Mobilized, on what makes a great product. And at the time that I was doing that, I was angel investing. So this book really was a great transition because it started a movement of product managers who wanted to build great products. And as you know, these product managers, they're also the people who start companies and join innovative companies. And so they were referring a lot of interesting startups to me, saying you should invest as an angel. And then after I would invest, I would send it back to them and say, hey, this is a great product. You should try it. You should buy it. And that created a very virtuous cycle, right? A whole ecosystem. And that's the core of what Mighty Capital is today at just a bigger scale.
Right. I mean, how'd you come up with the name Mighty Capital? That's kind of an interesting name. How'd you do that?
Well, my first surprise when I was looking for a name was Mighty Capital is available. Venture is like a 40-year-old business and nobody has picked that name. So I better grab it now quickly. We own the trademark and it's a great name. So we were looking for a name that would convey that we're more than just money, that we're very powerful, right? We're empowering founders because we add all these, this ecosystem and this massive marketplace. So powerful capital is sort of not quite the message you want to be sending. But Mighty Capital, was definitely, a very strong name. And then the added benefit is it also is a bit of an echo of my last name, MOATTI. And so,
nice. I didn't see that. That's nice. I didn't see that. But that's an Algerian name, right? Marathi, am I remembering this right?
It's a Jewish name. Yes.
Jewish name.
Yes, Sephardic Jewish. My dad was Jewish.
And what was his profession? What did he do? Do you see any of his DNA rubbing off on you from a business point of view?
My dad was an entrepreneur. And, my dad is also very strong influence in my life because he was terminally ill most of his life. He was a paraplegic, and he still, ran his own business, drove a car around, and so the strengths of character, the will, the sheer willpower of just surviving through decades of very severe illness. Made me realize, well, if he can do that, run his own business while, not having the use of his legs, what do I need to do? And so it really raised the bar for what, the meaning of like my life and the legacy I want to leave.
Nice. I mean, how about your mom? What did she do?
So my mom was also an entrepreneur, but inside a very antiquated organization, which is the French education system. She was a teacher. And she decided that everybody needed to learn English, which at the time in France was not very popular. And so she just set out to teach English to primary school kids without permission and created a movement inside the French Ministry of Education that led to this curriculum, right? English becoming mandatory in all French primary schools. And she published half a dozen books on how to teach French primary kids, English.
Wow.
And so that's her legacy. She was very much a rebel.
Are her books on Amazon? I mean, that also explains why you're writing books too, to some degree, I bet, right?
I would have to check if her books are still on Amazon. That was a while ago, but they were very popular, and many schools bought them for their pupils.
Did she go by her maiden name, or did she go by your dad's name?
So both. So Duval, which is a very French name, Duval MOATTI is how she goes by.
What's her first name? I'm curious because I'm going to search for her books too.
Brigitte.
Bridget. She's still alive. She's still alive, right?
Yes.
She's a pioneer. She's a pioneer. No, seriously.
She definitely is.
And you're a pioneer, because I frankly don't know, and I've been around in this field for more than 50 years. And I'd say the venture capital industry is more like 70 years old if you really go back to the beginning of it. I've got a book in progress that talks about the beginning of venture capital in Silicon Valley. I've got the whole history. And I've been interviewing some of the people that are getting really old, like in their 90s, and who remember starting when they were in their 20s. And I'll send you some of the links, but they're talking about how the field has changed and how it's all about money. And I can't identify a single Silicon Valley venture capital firm that is A, led by a woman, who B, is a French woman, and C, goes by the first two initials instead of her formal name. So you are in a special category of yourself, and I think you're doing something pretty marvelous. So that's a real big praise to you, because venture capital has been kind of a male game, and most of the males operate on kind of a football principle from my perspective. And, I typically don't represent venture capitalists. I represent the partners that get kicked out and then want to fight their firm to get their fair share. I do that. Yes. And of course, I deal with CEOs that they get fired all the time, right? I mean, there's always stories about negotiations and how hardball plays out. But, it's a funny game, because when I started, it was very much a mentoring game. It was less about the money, and the money was always, someone will find the money, we'll get it from a bank, we'll do a guarantee. And I think I told you, maybe I didn't, my first law firm at Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick, now Fenwick and West, we could have had a big chunk of Apple stock if we floated them a couple of years worth of deferred fees, not even waived fees, deferred fees. And like idiots, I'm sure they'll listen to this and say, don't call us idiots, but like idiots, we passed on that. And it was the whale that got away, and it was for stupid reasons, really dumb reasons. The guy that first met them thought, they didn't dress up for the meeting. That's strike one. They smelled bad and maybe were smoking some marijuana. That's strike two. And three was they had a stupid name for the company. They wanted to call it Apple. How crazy is that? And the guy had no foresight. But, when I think about it, the mentor, and by the way, the guy who ended up getting the big stake was Mike Markula, and he never put in a dime. He signed a guarantee for a line of credit, which really had very little risk because all the security interests on the parts and the in-progress work and the finished product were all tied up with the Bank of America. So they were going to get paid one way or the other. So that was such an easy thing for him to do. And if Mike is listening, he'll tell me, let me come on and tell the full story. But now I think it is, you tell me, now it seems to me more of like a spreadsheet calculation that often gets done where people are saying, look, I got to get 10x or 20x or 50x, and that may or may not happen in this lifetime. You tell me, what do you see? What do you see happening? Because you're kind of a modern woman playing in a very old game, maybe in a very modern way, right?
Yeah, that's the only way to survive. So a few reactions. One is you're correct that today there is no other French woman who runs a venture capital firm. So that's one. The second thing is,
nor have you taken any money from France, which really shocks me. Right? Am I right about that? Am I right about that?
Yes, you're 100% correct. It's too hard. And I hope they're listening and that changes. The second thing is, when we started MOITTI Capital, in fact, there's some articles you can find if you search for us online. I also wanted to go back to the roots of venture capital, which were all about mentorship. And I mentioned we have this gigantic ecosystem. We have 500,000, 600,000 product managers and chief product officers. So the value of the mentorship, I thought, would be the biggest value add that MOITTI Capital would bring. And our check was small initially. And then I realized that, it actually is moot in this environment, because if I write a check that's like, say, $1, and somebody across the table write a check, so $5 or $100, who's the entrepreneur going to listen to? It's obvious they're going to listen to the bigger check. And so if I actually want my mentorship to be valued, I have to write a big check. And so there's a real shift in the value of venture capital, where you have to play the game differently and disrupt. And, you and I think, share some of that rebellious attitude where, I certainly have had my fair share of being shunned and given the cold shoulder, and it creates, some desire to, one up and be even more successful sometimes. And it's very popular with a lot of entrepreneurs who like that rebellious aspect. But two, you also have to play by some of the rules. And one of the rules that you cannot play without is you have to be incredibly ambitious if you want to build a great firm. And so we just closed our third fund, which is $100 million. Nice. And in a couple of funds, we'll have, by 2030, $1 billion under management, which is how you continue to have, influence over founders and outcome and innovation. And therefore, going to your pyramid of 7 levels, making the world better, right? Because there's a lot of voices that are loud and that aren't necessarily positive voices out there. So the best way to fight that is to create your own positive voice and make it as loud as you can.
Right. So I'm kind of interested in knowing the history, because I knew you were on Fund 3. I didn't realize it was that big. When did you start Fund 1, and how much did you raise? And how did you go to Fund 2, and how much did you raise?
Yeah, so we do the same thing our B2B founders do: triple, double, double, double. So 10 million to 30 million to 100 million, that's triple.
Right.
100 million will go to 250, then 500, double.
Right.
And at 500, for the strategy that we deploy, Series A, enterprise software, this is scale. So after that, we'll look at different strategies, but we're not trying to your check has to be big enough. But if it's too big, you kind of shift the incentives, and as you know, things get broken, and there's infighting, and all the things that then you come in to fix. The types of investors and founders and people we want at the table is, the kind of guiding principle is mission aligned, right? That positive voice that I was sharing with you, and right sized. So people who want to support us, but drive to a strategy, not to kind of numbers.
Right. So I'm curious about, I see now entrepreneurs that walk in and they say, I'm not going to college. I've got a startup idea. I've graduated from a decent high school. I had one recently that said, hey, I had a full scholarship at MIT. I said, oh, you deferring it? No, I just told him to bag it. Bag it, MIT, give me a break, man. Don't you want to experience what that could be like? It's a waste of time. I self-learn, blah, 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 blah. He raised, I want to say $2 million. He's got a little tiny team. I mean, it was a shocking discussion because he was sort of can you do this for a few bucks and no incentive, no stock, no option, just kind of, I said, why don't you go to, LegalZoom? That's probably what he's going to do. I mean, he's a nice guy, but he's sort of penny-wise, in my opinion, penny-wise and pound foolish. But that was the interview. And I was trying to say to him, if I were you, I would tell MIT, hey, I'll come back in a couple of years after I'm a billionaire, maybe. And then I'll give you a big gift or something. He was like, oh, why would I give them a gift? Well, they gave you a scholarship, right? That's worth something. But what you must be seeing some entrepreneurs that are surprising you in terms of their youth, right? I think that's a trend now. It's becoming a trend.
So a few reactions to that. One is there's definitely a trend that says, education's overrated. I am absolutely, like you, not a believer of that. To me, education is the gateway from poverty to riches. So from rags to riches. And so I'm a firm believer in education. I think the people who oppose education, are kind of part of the problem of inequalities we're facing now. Now, the second trend is, right now we're in an AI boom. And so it's very tempting to want to take advantage of it, not want to miss the window. The one thing I would say there is, I think that AI boom is going to last for at least a decade. And so if you think about getting an education or starting a company that may not, go all the way, there's still plenty of time to go through that. In fact, a lot of the serial entrepreneurs we see, their strategy is start a company now, aim to sell it in 2-3 years, and start again and do it 3 times. And they're probably going to make more money, as you know, than if they start one and they try to go all the way to IPO just in one go. Right. Now, for first-time founders, and same thing, if you get an education, right, like the example you're talking about, maybe start a company on the side for a couple of years, go back to college, start another company. You still have a lot of time to be very successful this way. The third trend, which I think is a real misconception, is the idea that, hey, I'm the next Mark Zuckerberg. I was relatively early at Facebook. So I saw how the company unfolded. I had the privilege to, pitch a number of ideas to Mark Zuckerberg. And I can tell you, I've never met anybody else like this, literally never met anybody that smart. You talk to him and you hear the wheels turning at light speed. And so a lot of the people who, think they are the next Mark Zuckerberg, they really have to think about, what are the odds of that? I'll give you another example. On our team, we have somebody who's really smart, has 20 patents on AI. The value of, this is very high. And you probably know, there's 1 in 800,000 people who have 20 patents or more, right? Who have that level of smarts. And there's different ways to show who's smart and who's not. But that's the kind of odds we're talking about, to be a super successful next Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and so on. So definitely a bit of a reality check for some of these folks.
Well, there's a woman that just kind of wrote a biting book about Mark Zuckerberg called, I think, the Empire of AI, or the Empire of something. I don't know if you know. It's a very critical review. We won't get into that, but it's an interesting kind of story. The whole Facebook story is such an interesting story, because if you really think back, really think back to like, what was Facebook? There was actually something that IBM copied from another product. I know some of this history. Ultimately, it was called IBM Notes. It was actually Lotus that came out with something called Lotus Notes. And the only part that they didn't really integrate into Lotus Notes was all the photography stuff, right? But Lotus Notes was essentially a community that exchanged information. And then IBM bought it and tried to do something with it, and it kind of failed. And you could say either Mark or maybe those twins or some group of them or whoever it was came up with some view that, hey, we can do something that'll work just as well very quickly. And then they did that thing at Harvard that was kind of like, who's hot? I mean, I've read almost every book and watched almost every movie, because what I think part of my life purpose is, and you're going to laugh at this, is find the original pioneer who actually did invent the idea but did not succeed in the commercialization. We see that all the time. Like, I was there at the very beginning when Xerox was trying to create this great graphical user interface, and they did. And that machine was great. And then Jobs and Wozniak see that machine and they say, hey, we can eventually come out with something that has this great user interface. And Doug Engelbart, who was really the inventor of the Alto and the mouse and the graphical user interface, he gets like zero credit in this story. I mean, Doug is one of the most interesting inventors in the world, of course, now deceased. And, didn't really make much money over his lifetime. Should have, but didn't. But like, to me, he should be honored by Apple because he's really the inventor of the Mac, in my opinion, if you really trace the history. And sometimes I think that story gets lost. Like, people think different people really did things that to some degree they packaged it better. And this is all leading up to a question. It's a big roll up here, but I think you're going to like the question. How important is it to you to really figure out kind of the person that comes in? Do they authentically have the invention like it's their invention? Or do you look at it like, hey, they've repackaged this great electronic toothbrush that actually tells you how good your gums are. It gives you a little AI feedback. But the invention was done by somebody else, but they packaged it in a nice, small, portable package. And they didn't invent it, but they figured out a way to get it down in price. Like, tell me how you think about that, because I think different people evaluate that kind of thing differently. And in this world where we are today, right? So tell me how you think about it.
Yes, totally agree with you. What I'm seeing is post-COVID, there's a complete shift from more the visionary founders, what you're describing, like I'm the inventor of it. Sometimes I get the credit, sometimes I don't. There's always a part of a luck or destiny. But I'm more of a visionary. I want to change the world. To now, I'm here about making money, and I just want to get the money, and I'll package and so on. So I see a shift from visionary to mercenary post-COVID. And then the other thing is there's all sorts of ways for investors to make money, right? So maybe I should step one level up, which is a lot of entrepreneurs ask, hey, what are VCs looking for? And the answer is that simple. As you know, VCs are paid by their own investors, their limited partners, to make money. And so honestly, like, nothing else really matters except that. Now, there's a lot of different ways to make money. You can make money when you shoot all the way for an IPO, in which case, often it's more that repackaging that you're talking about, right? Right place, right time, people who have that go-to-market, engine, versus you can make money when you sell a company to another through M&A, in which case often the IP has a lot more value. And so I think there's different ways to take a look at that. But as an investor, you can meet your goal, which is make money, either one of those with either one of those types of entrepreneurs.
No, I think the edge that you have is you're French, so you probably can understand the way the French would look at products. France was like the first market that Apple succeeded in after America.
I didn't know that.
Yes, France was the first when they we represent, even though we didn't take their stock like idiots, we did represent them. We forced them to pay fees. That really was a big mistake. But the first market they had to decide, do we go into Germany? Do we go into, it's a big market. Do we go into Italy? Do we go into France? The overwhelming view was the French will love this machine. The French did love the machine. I think the French really caused the proliferation of the Apple Macintosh to make it throughout really the rest of Europe. I'm convinced of that. So they make, you have to make this right decision about what international market do you go into. Do you try to assist your startups with that, or do you leave it to later stage people that come in later in the game to help them with the international expansion?
We can help them with international expansion. Where we really add value is when we introduce them to these product managers. So when we make an investment, we essentially say, hey, let's tailor this network and turn it into a marketplace where, product managers can buy your product. And it turns out that in the Fortune 1000 right now, most of the decisions related to innovation, whether it's engineering, analytics, marketing, design, product, and many more, are either done by or vetoed by or championed by product managers. So it's a pretty big range of products that we can help accelerate.
So it sounds like your real edge, besides that you're French and you have a good eye for taste, of course, most French do, is you actually have kind of the pipeline that can help the startup founders see that there's an M&A potential to any of these 1,000 or more
exactly
managed. Like that's basically like almost a vertical integration into the way to get big distribution, right? Because
exactly
consumer product. So I'm curious, do you try to stay within a certain focus? Like some people say consumer products or electronic products or something that's going to replace, like maybe Mark will be lucky and the latest set of AR glasses are going to actually replace the iPhone, right? He's got a shot at that. I can't believe,
definitely does.
I think that Tim Cook must be like sweating this because I guess he killed the latest Vision Pro, which of course I buy all of these devices and play with them because I was with Jaron Lanier, we were early people in what was going on with VR and AR and MR. And I thought the Vision Pro was conceptually a good machine, but just too big and too bulky. And so I'm saying he's killed that, and apparently he's going to try to build something really fast. We'll see whether that really plays out. But I'm kind of curious. Do you try to target, or are you more open about it? What you're looking at?
Yeah, we focus on enterprise software, so B2B, not B2C.
Okay.
Most of our investments are in technology, security, but we also have some health AI, some fintech, anything that essentially is bought by a product manager or a VP of product, that's relevant for us.
Okay. So anyone that came in with you probably would screen out, hey, I've got a more advanced electronic toothbrush. And say, yeah, that's kind of a consumer.
We don't do a lot of devices. Yeah, you're right. We don't do a lot of consumer. We don't do a lot of devices. Those are farther away for us for now.
So I'm curious, the last part here that I want to cover, and definitely we'd have you come back on whenever your next book comes on or even sooner. But I'm kind of curious, where do you see the VC industry going? Because I have to tell you, I really think the mechanical exercise of manipulating a spreadsheet and wiring money is going to be totally wiped out by the way in which these younger and younger people say, I don't really need that much money. I can get started. I can get started with like a couple $100,000. And I got a million now. I've got runway for 5 years. The teams are smaller. They're using a lot more AI. The code is all on GitHub. I mean, there's so many advantages that years ago none of these companies had. And if you're a VC, you got to sort of worry that to some degree it gets harder and harder to place money to some degree.
Yes.
Right? So where do you see, like, if you had like a crystal ball and you're looking out, well, look out to your retirement date in 30 or so years. Yeah. What do you see as you look that far out?
So there's a couple of things. First of all, I totally agree with you that there's complete disruption of the venture value chain. And it's driven by what you described, which is founders, especially serial founders, need less and less money. I think that's temporary. I think that's going to change. Just like, in the early days of mobile and cloud, you could start a company and build an app really cheap, and then it became expensive again because it's more complex. There's expectations. The go-to-market is more expensive. So temporarily, I think there's an opportunity for very capital-efficient companies, which is what we're funding too. And then I think there's another change, which that is more permanent, which is no more IPOs. Nobody wants to go public anymore, and why? It's too complicated. And so the most of venture capital money is made from IPOs. And so a lot of the firms are structured to say, go big or go home, because it doesn't matter. I'm only counting on IPOs. But if you no longer have IPOs, then it means that M&A become a big exit driver again. And so how do you actually, create these M&As, make them more strategic than financial? And that's where, adding value becomes important again, like the mentorship that you were talking about. The product ecosystem, like what we have with a lot of buyers, is really important. So I think that's going to be like really shifting dramatically. The very big firms are going to become, perform way less. The very small firms, I think, are going to have a real challenge scaling. And so there's going to be kind of a changing of the guard, which is, what we're counting on for scaling our firm.
There's definitely a version of creative destruction playing out in a big way. I mean, I have to tell you, I see so many changes happening in the legal profession. I can't even enumerate them. There's just so many. Like years ago, you would never, ever accept an email from somebody saying, hey, I've got a client that really needs help. You would just say, forget it. That's crazy. Now, lawyers are jumping for the chance to be the first one to respond. It's like a Pavlov's dog. It's really funny because years ago, people would ignore that. It's noise. Now people are like, well, that's how you get a client. That's how you generate a lead. That goes into the top of the funnel. You have to have a system for segregating the good from the bad. And it's a little bit like people get overwhelmed and the AI systems have to end up helping. And I know you use it to some degree for your top of funnel, because I imagine you get a lot of unsolicited proposals or business plans or that sort of thing all the time, right? I imagine.
All the time. 2 years ago, we had 4 people managing our top of funnel, creating thesis. And so these 4 people could create 1 thesis a week.
Right.
And so when you were a smaller firm, it's hard to scale, like add more people, do more thesis, right? So the bigger firm had an advantage. We've implemented AI around that. And now 1 person can run 1 thesis per day.
Wow.
That's like a 20-time improvement.
Right.
And so we can compete with the largest firms because we can, kind of automate that top of funnel pretty effectively, which also works against them because now they have built up these gigantic teams that don't move as fast, that don't want to lose their jobs, right? And so being very nimble, and I know your firm is the same, right? Like you can execute so much more with so much less. So there's definitely like massive disruption coming in the venture capital industry, just like you're describing with the legal industry and the funnel.
Yeah, I mean, the legal industry, the consulting industry, you name it. Many years ago, I'll end with this point. Many, many years ago, there was a a guy and his son. They were both lawyers in, I want to say, the UK, both solicitors in the UK. And they wrote this book called The Future of the Professions. And I want to say this is like 20 years ago. And people who got the book, and I got an early copy and I read it and I thought, wow, this guy is predicting the professions are going to get wiped out by intelligence that will be baked into computer systems in an immediately accessible way. And he wasn't even talking about AI. He was just talking about the digitization of paper books into accessible documents. And people were like, no way. I mean, he said architects are going to see it, attorneys are going to see it, accountants are going to see it, priests are going to see it, priests, like who could imagine that, right? And that guy has been so right. His name is Siskind. I will get you the book. He's written 3 more books after. Now his son has. And he was really predicting in some ways what we're seeing now 20 years ago. Amazing. And he's got to be like in his 80s or 90s, but it would be interesting for him today. And maybe I can get him on the show. But let's end with this, because this podcast does make its way into Europe and to France. And I think you do deserve at least a few tens of millions of dollars from your own country in France. So how would people reach you? How do they best reach your firm these days if they either want to put money into the next fund or they want to see if you're interested in a product, a B2B product idea? How do they generally reach you?
Yes. So email me, sc@mighty.capital, or message me on LinkedIn or X, and I definitely am happy to connect.
Good. Well, thank you, SC. You're really marvelous, and thank you for spending the time. You are so lucky to be so young. I look forward to hearing about the success of Fund 2 and Fund 3, and I guess Fund 4. And I don't know what you're going to do with all that money, but I'd say you probably should start a little charitable foundation and get it started on what the next big idea is. Maybe pick up your mom's mission to some degree.
Yes. We do have a foundation, actually, like the community that engages these 500,000 product managers.
Right.
That's a nonprofit. So everything that this organization does is for free and is available to everybody. And a very significant portion of it has been funded by me and by Mighty Capital.
Oh, nice. That's a good story. I didn't realize that. So it's really a 501c3 that kind of has this mission. What's the name of it?
Exactly.
What's the name of that?
Products that count. And the mission is to allow everybody to build great products.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on all the success and keep it up. And I'll be tracking your progress. I do follow people that I think will be like the next significant thought leaders, and you're right there. So continue to do it. You're way ahead of Mark, by the way. I think, at some point he might write a book, but it'll be probably ghostwritten. So we'll see where that goes. Sorry, Mark. I just have to say the truth the way it is if you're listening. See you later, SC. Talk to you later.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.